Discover how an Apache gave up his farms for a son only to find unexpected love with a widow. In a quiet Arizona town, the sun dipped low over the fields Jim had tended for years. His calloused hands, evidence of a lifetime of hard work, gripped the weathered plow. He thought of his ancestors, their laughter dancing on the wind as they once thrived in this very soil. But as bills piled up and crops withered under the relentless sun, hope was fading. Just when he felt he'd lose everything, a chance arose. A troubled young boy named Cody needed a father. Jim's heart raced. Could this boy truly be the legacy he longed to pass down? His farmland felt insignificant compared to the bond they could share. With all he had at stake, Jim chose fatherhood over his legacy, believing love could mend both their hearts. Settling into his new role, Jim felt the weight of Cody's anger crashing over him like a storm. Each burst of rage from the boy was a stark reminder of battles he had not fought. Jim tried to comfort him, but Cody's icy glare felt like a barrier built of both fear and pain. Days blurred into nights filled with tension, where Jim would stare at the cracked ceiling of their tiny house, doubting if he had made the right choice. On tough days, even the thought of his crops felt heavier than the weight of parenthood. Everything looked bleak, until he met Sarah. She was the kind of woman whose laughter could splash light across any room. A widowed schoolteacher, Sarah understood loss as deeply as Jim did. Their first conversations were filled with a crackling tension. Her openness challenged his pride, their eyes mirrored tales of struggle neither wanted to admit. As they discussed their hardships, the town around them whispered of divisions of skin color and bank accounts, but together, they stood on the precipice of something promising. Before we continue, I need to let you know about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, hit that bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can drop a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Yet as they forged a bond, whispers of Sarah's plight ricocheted through the town. Small-town gossip would not let them breathe. It was like a churning storm that threatened to engulf their newfound connection. Jim quickly realized he had to act. He organized a fundraiser to rally support for their families, but the event spiraled out of control, leaving both him and Sarah vulnerable to ridicule. Shattered dreams, coupled with expectations, brought heartache crashing down like a tidal wave. As Jim stood alone, the weight of failure pressed against him. But hope flickered like a candle in the darkness. In a moment of courage, he stood before the townsfolk, ready to bare his soul not just for himself but for those he cared for. His voice trembled but resonated with love, struggle, and an unwavering commitment to his family and Sarah. Just as Jim felt barriers cracking around him, a disruptor's sneer cut through the air, reigniting tension, a reminder that their journey was far from over. Would their bond be strong enough to withstand the storm of deep-rooted biases? As doubts lingered in the hearts of the community, Jim and Sarah held tight, wondering if they would rise together or be pulled apart by the currents of old divisions. The next few days felt like an endless stretch of uncertainty. Jim's heart remained heavy as he worked the fields, each stroke of the plow unveiling more doubt and discouragement. Cody's anger lingered like a cloud over their home, each conversation shaky, each shared meal fraught with silence. Jim longed for a moment when they could laugh together, but instead, he felt walls growing taller between them. Then, one afternoon, while fixing a broken fence behind the house, Jim saw Sarah walking toward him. With her bright gaze and comforting smile, she cut through his gloom like rays of sunshine breaking through a storm. "Mind if I lend a hand?" she called out, an invitation blossoming in the air. As they worked together, their hands brushed unintentionally, igniting sparks of something deeper. Small talk turned into sharing dreams. "Do you think he'll ever trust me?" Jim sighed, wiping the sweat from his brow. "He just needs time," Sarah replied, her voice soothing like a gentle breeze. "You've both gone through so much. It won't be easy, but it's worth it." Later that week, Jim arranged a picnic for Cody, aiming to ease the burden looming over their lives. Gathering sandwiches and drinks, he also packed a small ball, hoping to bring back the joyful spirit he felt slipping away. Cody arrived at the clearing with a scowl on his face, arms crossed defiantly. "I don't want this, Jim," he grumbled, kicking at the grass. "Just give it a chance." "It's a beautiful day," Jim urged, trying to keep his excitement alive despite the boy's lack of enthusiasm. As the quiet moments stretched, Jim felt the tension shift slightly when he reached for the ball. "I used to play this with my little brother," he offered, throwing the ball gently at Cody. For a moment, it hung in the air, suspended like hope, before landing at Cody's feet. Cody hesitated. Then, almost reluctantly, he picked it up and tossed it back. Slowly, they fell into a rhythm, the ball exchanging hands, laughter slowly seeping into the cracks of their strained relationship. Jim's heart soared with each playful exchange, a flicker of hope rekindling with every thrown ball, but just as warmth began to fill the spaces between them, Jim's mind raced back to Sarah and the fundraiser aftermath. What had people said about them? How had the town reacted to their connection? Each insult lingers, drumming against his heart like a relentless beat. That evening, Jim stood on the porch, gazing at the stars, when he heard Sarah's laughter a few houses down. He felt that familiar pull towards her. She brought a lightness he struggled to find himself. He took a deep breath, mustering courage, and started walking toward her. As he approached her home, he saw her sitting on the porch with a few of her close friends, their laughter spilling into the night air. His heart sped up, he liked her more than he dared admit. "Hey, mind if I join?" Jim asked, trying to catch her eye amid the merriment. They turned, and Sarah met his gaze with warmth. "Of course. We were just talking about the upcoming school picnic. You should come." His heart fluttered at the thought. But as he stepped into the circle of light, a shadow loomed closer, a familiar sneer and mocking tone from one of the town's harshest critics. "Look at them, folks. How does it feel to condescend to a widow now?" The laughter ceased, replaced by a heavy silence. Everyone watched. Jim's throat tightened, his instinct screamed to defend himself and Sarah. But then he remembered Cody, the little boy with a heart lost in anger. This wasn't just for him, it was for them all. Would they rise above this moment or succumb to deep-rooted fears? With a deep breath, Jim squared his shoulders. Would he be able to find the words that could change everything? The air buzzed with tension, alive with uncertainty. What would he say next? Jim stood there, caught between two worlds. The silence pressed against him, thick like the warm summer air. All eyes were on him, waiting, and he could feel the weight of judgment hanging in the balance. He glanced at Sarah, whose smile wavered but didn't fully fade. She was stronger than he realized. "Look," Jim finally began, his voice steady despite the pounding of his heart. "I know this town has seen its share of gossip. I'm not here to change anyone's mind about me or about Sarah. But I ask you to think about what this feels like from our side. We're not just headlines, we're people." And Cody, he stole a glance at his son, who stood uncomfortably by the porch rail, his face a mixture of confusion and anger. Cody needs stability. He needs to know it's okay to love. The critic scoffed, but Jim pushed on. "We've all lost something. Every one of us has felt pain. But what defines us is how we choose to move forward. I want to build a life where my son can heal, and that includes Sarah. If that upsets you, I can't help that. But I refuse to live my life in shadows." A flicker of surprise crossed the faces of those around him. Sarah's expression shifted from uncertainty to something he could only describe as pride. He could feel the air change as whispers circled, but there was a different energy, not as harsh, more contemplative. Then, to his astonishment, Cody spoke up. "Dad's right." Surprised, Jim looked at his son, whose voice held weight beyond his years. "People should just let us be. We're freaking trying here." That burst of defiance was like a bomb, soothing Jim's frayed nerves. He felt hope blooming, strengthening the bond he was striving to build with Cody. The critic's sneer slipped, but it was ground-down pride that kept him quiet. The tension in the air felt like a string pulled taut ready to snap. Jim searched the gathering, looking for understanding, for allies. There were a couple of tentative nods, and for the first time, the sea of faces didn't feel entirely hostile. Maybe, Sarah spoke softly, her voice cutting through the lingering silence, we can start making better choices. Choose kindness over judgment. Life's too short, right? She offered a smile that illuminated the darkness threatening their small moment. Instead of retreating into harsh silence, laughter gradually returned to the group, but it felt different now, less mocking, more hopeful. They started sharing stories of their children, soccer matches, and school plays. Jim felt the walls between him and Cody starting to crack. As the night wore on, coincidence slipped through the cracks of Jim's initial heaviness, filling the air with laughter. He grasped the ball again, recalling that pitch-perfect moment from their picnic, and tossed it toward Cody. "Let us see what you've got, champ." Cody caught it with a determined look, and for the first time in a long while, a smile broke across his face. He threw the ball back, and their rhythm picked up once more, laughter echoing into the night as Jim felt lighter, as if a great weight was slowly lifting, but just as things seemed to settle, a sudden chill swept through the night. One voice broke through again, sharper than a knife. "You'll never fit in, Jim. You don't belong here." Jim's heart sank, and he looked around to see a familiar face stepping back into the shadows, emboldened by the darkness. That shadow loomed like a specter from his past, ready to reignite the doubts he had just begun to fight. With the evening's warmth battling against the cold, Jim felt the stirring of conflict once more. Would he stand his ground, or would the words of a single man slice back through the fragile peace he had finally started to build? As he gazed into the crowd, he felt strength wash over him, but the ache of uncertainty nagged at the edges of his resolve. Could he hold on in the face of renewed hostility? The night was shifting, and so was he. He only hoped it would be enough. What would come of that confrontation? And how would their lives change when all their fears collided with one single determined expression of love? Jim's breath hitched as the cutting remark reverberated in the air. It was as if time slowed down, and all the laughter, all the warmth, was sucked away into the shadows. He looked around, faces twisted in disbelief or contempt, others stunned into silence. "I don't belong," he whispered, more to himself than to the group. Confusion swelled into anger at the audacity of the voice that had dared to challenge not just him but the fragile peace he had begun to build. Cody, still clutching the ball, turned sharply to face the source of the venomous accusation. "You don't know anything," he shouted, his hands clenching into fists. Jim's heart swelled with pride for his son, yet fear gripped him anew. Would Cody become an easy target, just like him? "Cody, it's okay," Jim said, stepping closer, feeling the heat of his own frustration bubbling up. "Let's just keep playing." But as he glanced back, he saw the specter of his past Mark. They had shared childhoods, moments that felt innocent then, now twisted by years of perceived betrayal. Mark smirked, and for a brief moment, their eyes locked. That connection, the hurt, the betrayal, it was all there, festering just beneath the surface. Mark's presence was a reminder of every struggle Jim had faced since leaving the life he once knew. Just then, a soft voice broke through his spiraling thoughts. "Remember when we were kids, Jim?" Sarah spoke gently, her eyes searching his. "This isn't who we are." There was an invitation in her words, a call to rise above the darkness festering at the edges of their new community. Jim straightened, taking a deep breath. The crowd led a cacophony of emotional responses, some nodding in support, others still clinging to their prejudice. "No, it's not who we are," he echoed, conviction, steering his gaze back to those who had gathered. "But we can change. We can choose to be better. To shed the past, no matter how hard it is." The night sky, once bright with stars, felt heavy with expectation. For Cody, for Sarah, and for a future, Jim continued, the fierceness in his voice rising. "I will not shy away from who I am anymore." As he spoke, something shifted in the crowd. He felt the initial warmth return, like the dawn breaking over the dark horizon. Conversations began to murmur through the gathering as some nodded in agreement, starting to push back against the negativity Mark had sowed, yet still, Mark stood firmly, arms crossed, carving out his stance. You think that by making a speech, you'll win them over? They'll always remember who you are on the inside. You'll never be anything more than an outsider. Cody stepped forward, fire in his eyes. It doesn't matter. We're here. We're trying. And you can't change that no matter how hard you try. There was strength in his voice, a bridge forming towards acceptance. Meanwhile, Jim could feel tension weave through the crowd, a mosaic of hope, bitterness, and now, resolve. Who we were doesn't define us, he affirmed, his heart pounding. Our mistakes don't erase our future. Mark's smirk faltered, and for the first time, uncertainty flickered in his expression. The balance was tipping, new faces were starting to filter into the crowd, people Jim barely recognized, but seemed willing to listen. Maybe, whispered a woman from the sidelines, he can be one of us, if we let him. Jimmy's stomach flipped with hope as a spark of unity flickered within him. This wasn't just a battle for acceptance, it was a battle for love, for family, for the chance to build something new against all odds, but what would it take for the others to open their hearts? And would the bonds forged tonight stand firm against the challenges lurking just beyond the horizon? The questions hung in the air as the night thickened around them, yet in that tension, the possibility of transformation glimmered just out of reach. In the thick of the night, Jim could feel the energy of the crowd buzzing around him. It was exhilarating and terrifying. The warmth of some supporters clashed with the coldness of others still caught in their long-held prejudices. He searched the faces, looking for signs of understanding, but all he saw were doubts still swirling. Jim, Sarah's voice cut through the noise, steady and reassuring. Think about what the kids need. They're watching us. She nodded towards Cody, whose spirit remained undeterred. We need to show them that love is stronger than hate. Jim's gaze drifted to his son. Cody stood tall, his youthful confidence a stark contrast to the uncertainty Jim felt inside. A flicker of recognition lit within him, he was the role model now. This was his moment to protect and to uplift. I remember when this town used to be different, another voice chimed in from the crowd, a middle-aged man with a weathered face. We welcomed everyone. We shared. There was a collective stirring as people began to murmur in agreement. Maybe tonight wasn't destined for division. Let us bring it back, Sarah urged, we all want a place we belong. Let us fight for that together. Her eyes spoke volumes, hushed encouragement mixed with the weight of hope. What about Mark? Someone whispered from the outskirts, casting a nervous glance his way. Mark remained a looming figure, arms still crossed, reluctant to let go of the past. The crowd fell silent, caught between wanting to move forward and the dread of facing old shadows, but Jim was done hiding in the shadows. Mark! He called out, his voice booming across the field. You know me. You've known me for years. I've made mistakes, some big ones. But I'm trying. We all have burdens. Why can't we share them instead of holding on to bitterness? A stillness blanketed the gathering. Mark's expression flickered, revealing a hint of vulnerability. It was the first sign Jim had seen that maybe they weren't so far apart after all. Jim, it's easy to say that, Mark replied, his voice lower. But how do we just forget the past? Can't we just go back to being who we've always been? Too many things have changed, Jim answered carefully, feeling the weight of Mark's words. But we can be better. You can be better, too. We all can. Cody stepped up closer to his father, and Jim could feel his son's resolve beside him. It was infectious. We can help each other, Cody said, his youthful sincerity breaking through the tension. You used to be friends. You can still be. A ripple of agreement surged through the crowd. Some began to nod, their expressions softening. Others exchanged glances of reflection. Perhaps hope was growing roots in the stubborn soil of skepticism. Finally, Mark's gaze shifted toward the ground, and when he looked back up, there was a different energy about him. If we do this, if we really choose to move forward, the air buzzed with anticipation, and Jim felt his heart race. This was more than a simple gathering. It was a chance for rebirth, not just for him, but for everyone. The crowd leaned forward, hungry for change, eager to find common ground. "Let us start here," Mark conceded at last, voice tinged with sincerity. The subtle shift in his tone sent a wave of relief washing over Jim. It was the beginning of something tangible, a promise, maybe, that they could create something new together. But as hope blossomed, there was still a lingering fear. What if the past reared its ugly head again? Jim felt the weight of uncertainty press down, a reminder that change doesn't come easy. With the night winding down, he could feel both the excitement and the unknown clashing against each other inside him. They were at the edge of transformation, and in that thrilling moment, he wondered, would they hold on to this moment of connection, or would it slip away into the darkness again? The night hung heavy with possibilities as Jim looked at his son and those gathered around. What would the morning bring for a community on the brink of change? And would they rise to the occasion together, or would the shadows of their past bring them back to isolation? The hum of whispered conversations filled the air as the night deepened, tension still lingering like the damp chill. Jim stood at the forefront, his heart pounding, eyes searching for resolution in the crowd. He could sense the shift, a palpable change brewing among them, like storm clouds gathering before a downpour. Cody's grip tightened on his hand, squeezing tightly, a connection made stronger with each passing moment. The boy's wide eyes were filled with hope, and Jim felt that same hope igniting within him. As voices rose and fell, he knew they were standing on a precipice. It was a point of no return, either they moved toward unity or allowed the past to pull them apart once more, but then, like a specter rising from the shadows, Mark's voice cut through the crowd. "If we are really trying to move forward, how do we start? What does that look like?" His tone was firm, yet there lay an underlying tremor, an invitation for action. Jim felt the gravity of the moment. They needed a plan. "We could hold regular meetings, share our challenges, our fears," he began to outline, excitement mingling with fear. "We could create things together, projects that matter to us all. Let us start with something small, something everyone can get behind." The crowd murmured, nodding slowly, some faces lighting up with fleeting smiles. It was tentative, but it was something. "What if we built a community garden?" Sarah suggested, her energy infectious. "A place where families can come together, grow food, share stories." "Yes." Cody chimed in, joy erupting on his face. "We could plant flowers. I love flowers. And we can get everyone to join, kids and parents." Jim watched as the crowd began to stir, voices intertwining with renewed enthusiasm. The idea of the garden blossomed, a symbol of renewal right there in the heart of their town. But then uncertainty draped itself over the optimism like a dark cloud. Too many different people, cultures, what if they can't agree? Mark's voice faltered, doubt creeping back in. "How do we make sure this won't end up tearing us apart?" "By showing up," Jim replied, feeling a spark of determination light within him. "No one person has to carry the weight alone. Everyone here has something to offer. It begins with listening to ideas, concerns, and hopes. Together, we can be the change we want to see." He caught the eye of a few individuals' faces etched with stories, with laughter and pain. They weren't just spectators, they were part of this fabric, woven together, however frayed. As they discussed the logistics, Jim lost himself in the energy of the moment. Ideas flowed freely like water, dreams intertwining like roots reaching out for each other. He felt the warmth of connection grow stronger. In that crowded field under the vast sky, something profound was starting. Real friendships could emerge. Bonds could be rebuilt. But as the energy surged, a sharp cry silenced the air, a commotion at the edge of the gathered crowd. Startled, Jim turned toward the source, eyes widening. A figure stood apart from the others, face tightened with fury. You think this will mean anything? A woman's voice thundered, slicing through the hopeful atmosphere. The crowd turned, confusion rippling through them. Her presence was commanding, full of both anger and pain. I lost too much to just pretend things have changed. Jim's heart sank. This wasn't the voice of acceptance. This was a challenge, and it threatened to rip the fragile peace apart. Voices echoed around him, murmurs of uncertainty swelling as tension rose, a stark reminder of how quickly hope could be extinguished. Could they still stand united when faced with the raw scars of the past? Would the foundation they were trying to build be strong enough to withstand such force? As Jim held his breath, waiting for the crowd's response, uncertainty clawed at him. This moment would decide everything. Would they crumble or would they fight back together? The tension in the air felt heavy, almost suffocating. Jim shifted on his feet, his mind racing. Who was this woman, and what had she lost? Her eyes blazed with emotion, and for a moment, it felt like everyone was standing at the edge of a cliff, teetering precariously. Listen. He called out, his voice cutting through the murmurs like a knife. We're not here to erase the past. We're here to acknowledge it, to grow from it. The woman crossed her arms, her negative energy palpable. You think a garden can fix what's broken? Just planting flowers won't bring back what you lost, or heal those wounds. The crowd shifted uneasily. Jim could feel doubt creeping into hearts that had just begun to open. He took a step forward, each heartbeat echoing in his ears. No, it won't fix everything. But it can be a start. A place where we can all come together, to remember, to heal, to create new memories. Her fierceness softened just a bit, and he caught a glimpse of vulnerability lurking behind her anger. What makes you think I want to be part of this idealistic dream? Because deep down, we're all looking for something. A connection. Community. Hope, Jim replied earnestly. Maybe it won't be easy. But we can't let our past define our future. He glanced at Cody, whose small hand still clung to his. The boy's innocent hope flickered in Jim's heart, a reminder of what they were fighting for. What do you have to lose by trying? If we fail, then it's just one more scar to carry. But if we succeed, if we can create something beautiful out of our pain. Some heads began to nod, and he sensed the tide shifting. Others began to whisper among themselves, glancing at the furious woman who loomed like a cloud in their midst, forcing them to confront their own tangled fears. I lost my brother, she finally spoke, her voice quivering with raw grief. He died because of the hate that tore our community apart. How can I trust any of you after that? A palpable gasp swept through the crowd. Jim swallowed hard. This was deeper than he had anticipated. I'm so sorry, he said softly. Your pain is valid. We can't pretend to understand it, but we can listen. Let us put aside assumptions and come together, for him, for us all. There was quiet, almost reverent. The weight of her sorrow hung in the air, heavy and real. For the first time, it felt like they were beginning to break through the barriers that divided them. The woman's features softened just a fraction. What if I don't want to forgive? What if I just want to keep my distance? That's okay. But it doesn't mean you can't be part of this, Jim urged. You don't have to forgive everyone right now. Let us work toward understanding, however long it takes. Let us create a space where healing can happen, even if it's slow. The crowd grew restless, the tension still simmering, but Jim could feel a spark igniting within some hearts. Slowly, a few people began to murmur their agreements, sharing their stories, their losses. It became a cascade, a wave of vulnerability washing through the group, but just as hope flickered, a voice broke through the emotional haze. What if another tragedy happens? What guarantee do we have this won't lead to more pain? Jim faced the crowd again, heart racing. Life doesn't come with guarantees. But we can choose how to face it together, and that choice starts now. As he spoke, a new intensity filled the space, heavy with questions that loomed like shadows. The atmosphere was electric, charged with possibilities. Would they move toward healing? Or would old wounds poison this new endeavor? His eyes darted back to the woman. Her gaze was piercing, still uncertain but now laced with curiosity. What if it does work? What if we can find some small light in this darkness? Jim held his breath, feeling the weight of everything resting on that question. Would they embrace the chance, or retreat into the shadows once more? Would they dare to take that leap together? In that moment, as the crowd stood on the brink of something monumental, one undeniable truth hung in the air. Sometimes, the hardest path to take was the one toward open hearts. The crowd was still, the collective breath held as if the very air thickened with tension and unspoken emotions. Jim could feel the spark of hope wane and reignite with each passing moment. The woman's vulnerability, raw and exposed, drew in those around her like moths to a flame. Maybe we can, she began, her voice trembling. Maybe we can find a way. But not everyone, not all of you will understand. There was a flicker of defiance in her words, a challenge wrapped in a plea. What if I tell you my story? A voice rang out from the back. A man in a worn denim jacket stepped forward. His eyes were shadowed with history. The crowd turned, all ears on him, sensing he carried a weight of his own. I lost my family to the violence too, he said, voice steady, but the pain etched deep in his features. I watched my sister lose her life just like that. And I have spent years pushing people away, thinking it would numb the hurt. But, burying my head in the sand didn't fix anything. He paused, glancing around the crowd, his expression searching. Maybe we need to face the hurt together. A ripple of agreement murmured through the crowd, a few voices echoing his sentiment, yes, yes. Look, Jim stepped back in, inspired by the unexpected bond forming. We're not asking for forgiveness today. That's a journey each of us has to walk on our own. But we can start here. We can begin to understand one another, and even share our burdens. The woman's gaze softened, skepticism still lingered beneath the surface. And what if my burden is too heavy? What if I can't shoulder that weight with others? Then lean on us, Cody chimed in, squeezing Jim's hand tighter. Jim felt the warmth of the boy's small grip. You don't have to do it alone. The crowd shifted, a palpable sense of connection blossoming as they leaned closer to one another, bound by shared grief. Jim could see glances exchanged, uncertainties being cast aside in favor of something stronger. What does healing look like? The woman asked, her voice quieter now, betraying a hint of openness. It looks like building a garden, Jim said thoughtfully. It looks like planting seeds of memories together. It looks like taking turns watering roots, fostering growth, remembering together those we lost, the wounds we carry. The idea of a garden took hold, each person picturing the patch of earth that held stories waiting to be told. But what if something grows that we don't want? A woman in front asked, her eyebrows knitted together as doubt crept back in. Then we prune it back, Jim replied, feeling the shift in atmosphere. We nurture what we want to thrive. We come together in this space to help each other flourish. Eyes darted from the woman to Jim, sensing a shared understanding unfolding. One by one, people began to step forward, sharing their grief, their losses, their hopes. The emotional buzz that filled the space pushed boundaries down, weaving threads of shared experiences together, binding them closer as a community. Just then, the woman stepped forward fully, the fire in her eyes reignited. Maybe we can start to rebuild something, even if it feels like it's all we have left. Jim's heart soared, filled with gratitude at this small act of courage. But amid the hope that enveloped them, a distant siren echoed in the background, a chilling reminder that not everything was resolved. Wait, Jim said, feeling a trepidation creep back in. What happens when we start to confront our past? What other shadows are lurking beyond these walls? As uncertainty hung in the air like a storm cloud, he could see realization dawning, intertwining fear with the fragile thread of hope. It seemed that the journey toward healing had only just begun, and the path ahead might hold painful truths they weren't ready to face. Would they be able to keep moving forward, or would those shadows pull them back into despair? As the crowd held their breaths, both anticipation and anxiety swirled around them, igniting the next chapter waiting to unfold. The tension in the air was palpable. The soft murmur of the gathered crowd mingled with the wails of the siren in the distance, each sound echoing like a heartbeat, steady, then frantic. Jim shifted his weight, glancing from face to face, searching for reassurance, for any glimmer of what lay ahead. In the midst of the uncertainty, the woman stepped closer. If we talk about our past, I want to know, will it make us stronger? Tears glimmered in her eyes, but so did resolve. The crowd leaned in even more, pulled by the strength emanating from her vulnerability. A young man in the crowd called out, "It can. Remembering can remind us why we fight. Why we keep going. It's not just about the pain, it's about the love and the light we can still hold on to." His voice cracked but held a fierce determination. "Exactly," Jim added, feeling the tide turn. "Our past exists for a reason, the good and the bad. It's a patchwork of who we are. What if we began to honor every thread? The loss, the joy, the little moments that kept us going. What if those threads were the foundation of our garden?" Cody piped up, his youthful voice cutting through the heaviness. "Like my mom always says, we can plant flowers in the same place as weeds. We just have to choose which ones to nurture." A light laugh spread through the crowd, a small crack in the shadow of sorrow. The woman smiled faintly, her skepticism easing as the warmth of community enveloped her. As more people spoke, sharing snippets of their pasts, Jim felt the collective energy shift. Their stories began to bloom like the seeds they had discussed, each tale unfurling against the backdrop of pain, creating a vibrant tapestry of resilience. There was the man whose brother had been his sanctuary but was lost to the streets. Another woman leaned forward, sharing how each sunrise reminded her of the laughter that once filled her kitchen, silenced too soon. "Do you see?" Jim pointed out, waving his hands, as if trying to gather the energy. "Every story contains light. Whether it's a flicker or a flame, they all ignite something in us. And together, we can fan those embers into something beautiful." But just then, the siren wailed again, louder this time, slicing through the moment like a hot knife through butter. Jim felt a knot tighten in his stomach. The reality of their situation loomed large beyond this fragile cocoon of hope they were weaving. What if the very shadows we're trying to face are coming for us again? The woman's fear spilled over, and the mood in the crowd shifted. Distrust and anxiety began to swell like a tide, pulling at their fledgling sense of belonging. "Fear doesn't just come from the past," a man in the back said, his voice surprisingly calm. "It's a response to what we can't control. But what if we take a stand? What if we choose bravery instead?" The sound of shifting feet and muttered words emphasized the conflict brewing within them. Jim stepped forward again, drawn by a sense of urgency. "We can't predict what's to come, but we can choose how we face it. If we stand united, our shared memories will be the armor for whatever comes next." He could see a few nods, but the doubt remained. Would fear chain them, or would they choose to shatter those bonds together? Cody lifted his hand and chimed in again. "So if it feels scary, we hold tight to each other. We don't let go. Right?" His innocent intuition struck a chord, and the atmosphere began to shift once more, a web of understanding, of camaraderie weaving through the crowd. As Jim looked around, he sensed something monumental brewing. They were at a crossroads, teetering on the edge of a new chapter. The siren still blared outside, a reminder of the world beyond their circle. But among the friends and neighbors who now stood shoulder to shoulder, the promise of solidarity illuminated the shadows. Facing those fears, Jim murmured, "What does that even mean for us? And are we truly ready for the journey to reclaim our paths?" The question hung there, pregnant with possibility. As the answer loomed just out of reach, they braced for the next challenge, a deep breath before the plunge into the unknown. Would they cultivate the bravery they sought, or would doubt pull them back into darkness? With hearts racing, the crowd shifted anew, ready to discover what lay beyond their fragile moment of hope, poised on the brink of an impending storm. The morning sun crept over the Arizona horizon, casting warm hues on the faces of neighbors who had gathered to witness what they had all built together. Jim stood at the entrance of the community garden, hands on his hips, the weight of anticipation mingling with newfound hope. The soil was rich and dark, ready to embrace life, as they done with their hearts the seeds of their community finally planted in shared belief. Cody rushed up beside him, a wide grin splitting his face. "Look, Dad. It's even better than I imagined." His enthusiasm was contagious, and Jim couldn't help but smile back. The little boy had transformed so much since they took this leap together. "I'm proud of you, kiddo," Jim replied, kneeling down to catch Cody's gaze. "You never stopped believing we could change things, did you?" The joy radiating from his son filled the cracks of Jim's heart, still healing from all that had once felt lost. As they stood there, Sarah joined them, her laughter intertwining with the chorus of children playing nearby. "I think we may have a future gardener here," she teased, her eyes sparkling as she watched Cody toss seeds into the earth. "Maybe I'll plant flowers like the ones we picked last week." He beamed. "Flowers and veggies," Jim added, patting his son's back. "We'll grow them all together." The laughter swirled around them, a symphony of hope harmonizing with memories of their struggles. It was the light of a new beginning, powered by resilience, and Jim felt the pulse of the community behind him. Across the garden, the woman who had challenged them stood alone at first, uncertainty clinging to her like a shadow. But as she watched groups of families working side by side, her heart hesitated between sorrow and the stirring promise of something new. Jim caught her eye and walked toward her, sparks of determination igniting within him. "You've been through so much," he said, his voice steady yet gentle. "This garden is our way to honor everyone we've lost to create and remember." "I want to," but she hesitated. "What if this experience only reminds me of the pain?" Jim nodded, acknowledging her fear. "Then let us embrace that together. We can share those pains, those stories. We can weave healing within these walls, just like the plants will grow beside one another." She smiled faintly. It was a start. That moment, his heart raced. People had begun to approach her, offering warmth, stories, and fragments of their own pasts. A bond formed, bindings of compassion wrapping tightly around their shared struggles. This was community where darkness met light, where voices blended together, lifting each other higher. Sarah stood near the entrance, surrounded by a circle of newly formed friends. "We all have areas where we struggle," she said, her voice bright and inviting. "This garden is about nurturing those connections. Let us not just plant seeds, let us plant love and acceptance and create a network we can rely on." Throughout the day, laughter filled the air. Cody darted from task to task, the embodiment of unfiltered joy. The doubts that had once loomed over Jim and Sarah transformed into shared smiles and purposeful action, as their community rejuvenated in the presence of acceptance. As dusk fell, painting soft pastels across the sky, Jim gathered everyone. "Thank you for believing in something bigger," he said, addressing the crowd. "Together, we're not just changing ground, we're nurturing roots of trust. The past may linger, but it doesn't dictate our future. We are building a legacy, a family that includes everyone." Cody leaned into Jim's side, offering a proud smile to everyone gathered. "We'll be strong for each other, right? Like flowers and vegetables." "Exactly." Jim grinned, ruffling his son's hair, relieved to see the shadow of loneliness fading, replaced by the warmth of community. As they looked around at each other, at the faces marked by laughter and loss, something beautiful took root. The garden, once a mere plot of land, now promised growth in every sense. With a united front, they would reach for the light, holding on to one another fiercely. The air buzzed with energy and laughter. Neighbors exchanged glances filled with promise, acknowledging the connections, the heartbeats of their growing family. And just as hope blossomed in the garden, the shadows of the past began to retreat, grateful for the light they had all chosen to share. As Jim and Cody stood side by side, hand in hand, Jim realized this was home. This was what they had fought for together, a community woven from love, acceptance, and the raw beauty of every one of their stories. Together, they would continue to transform, push through the weeds, and cultivate the boundless possibilities of tomorrow. If you believe in the power of stories, strength and unity, and the magic that comes from transforming pain into love, you need to subscribe now. This is the moment to show your support. Leave a like now to fuel the algorithm driving our journey. Comment your feelings and reactions about this emotional conclusion. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this incredible transformation. Don't wait not even one more second to share. Spread the word, let us inspire each other. Together, we will cultivate more stories that uplift and unite.